legends, I hope you're all fantastic. We're going to be doing a deep dive on the Fractal AM4 today. I want to show you how the core functions on the AM4 work, how you go about dialing in tones, and I also want to highlight a few features that are different from other Fractal audio products. So you can see we've got 4 effects blocks over here. You've also got an input block with a built-in gate and an output block that lets you set a preset EQ, and it lets you set your scene levels in here as well. I'm going to start out with an amp block in quick build. So we'll just drop that one in straight away. So far, it looks pretty familiar if you've used other Fractal products. You've got the amp page with your authentic amp controls. I'm using the band commander model at the moment. So I've got gain, bass, treble, the bright switch, and a level control. There is a graphic EQ section in here, which is currently disabled. That's only going to be enabled by default on amps that have a real graphic EQ, like say a Boogie Mark series amp. What is different from the usual amp block in other Fractal audio products is that the cab block is integrated into the amp in here. And one thing that I really like is by default, you're using Dynacabs. You can have 2 Dynacabs blended on here really easily. But when you select a different amp model, say I go to the Brit 800 2203 high, you can have it so that it defaults to a different Dynacab on there. If I wanted a 5153 model, it will select a relevant, I should say appropriate Dynacab on there as a starting point. So I really like that. Let's just go back to the band commander. This defaults to this 2x12 double verb Dynacab with a condenser mic on. You've got an extras section over here where you've got your levels. You've got the built-in amp output boost, which is a new feature. And there's the cab room along with a few extras like the IR length, the overall amp level, and whether you have the cab engaged or disengaged. So, I'm playing a Strat on the neck pickup into a Fender style amp. I can move the virtual microphone around on that Dynacab. I can blend in a second Dynacab and mic choice on there. And the way I think about these is essentially as I move further away from the center of the speaker in this axis, I'm going to make the sound darker. As I move the virtual mic further away from the virtual speaker on there, I'm going to be taking out low end on there. So it's like having an EQ process built in just by moving these virtual mics around. And if you've recorded real guitar amps and guitar speaker cabs, that's kind of what you do when you set up a tone in the real world. I really like that. Of course, you've got the option if you want to use user cabs in here to do that. I've preloaded a couple of my favorite user cabs. These are available for free. Check the link in the video description. I can also change the type of Dynacab. What are there? 45 different Dynacabs. So if I wanted to say this 4x12 EV Dynacab blended with a 2x12 double verb, I can do that really easily as well. Once I'm happy with the blend, I can use the master low cut and high cut on here to kind of fine tune the tone. It is really nice having all of this streamlined into a single block. Another cool feature in the extras section is the ability to have the cab room simulation on there. I find a little goes a long way with this one. I like cranking up the room size over here. And if you're playing on headphones and you don't want to use a dedicated reverb block for some ambience, this will do the trick nicely. Like 10 to 20% room level works great. also got the output boost control on there. By default, when you're on the effects layout of the AM4 and you press the foot switch, that is assigned to the amp block. This will engage or disengage the output boosts on there. Great if you need a little bit of a level boost to make your solos stick out, and you've got up to 4 dB of boost available on there, which I really like. Now, that is just using the amp, the cab, and some of the little extras in there. Of course, this is a Fractal product. If you go to Expert Edit, you've got everything laid out on here. This is going to be a lot more like what you're used to on, say, the AXFX3, FM9, or FM3. You've got your expert settings with, I guess, like inauthentic controls on there. The idea being that this would let you virtually mod your amp in there. You can get in and fine tune the preamp section in there, including things like the saturation mod. You can add an input boost in here. You know, there's all the same options as the amp block on the other Fractal products. The power amp, of course, you can customize. The cabinet section, you can really deep dive over here, which I appreciate as well, and play around with things like the mic spacing on the room. You've got all the cab block extras in there. And of course, you've got the impedance curve modeling. I find this is a really powerful tool, in particular with higher gain tones, which we all know I love to play around with. I think for a lot of people, that stuff is daunting. So just having these simple controls, the amp, the virtual mics that you can move around on different virtual speaker cabinets, and then, you know, fine tune it with the extra section over here. This is a great way to get a platform laid down with your amp. Let's go, say, to channel B in the amp block. And what I'm going to do is select, say, the Brit 800 2203 high. Let's hear this at the stock amp and cab setting. Somebody who grew up playing Marshalls through 4x12s and often trying to mic them and record them myself, this workflow makes so much sense. You know, just dial in the amp to where it sounds good, get the right cab and mic combination on there. If you have to, apply a little bit of filtering. And what I could never do with my real amps was open them up and mod them. And I could do that in here, like add the saturation mod, add an input boost on there immediately. I'm up and I've got a glorious dirty sound over there. If I wanted on another channel, for example, I could use the blocks library function, and I've pre-dialed in a whole bunch of different blocks on here. Shameless plug, if you want my blocks library for the AM4, it's linked in the video description. But I could take something like, say, a Boogie Mark IV. I've dialed in the cabs over here. I've dialed in the graphic EQ to where I like it and the authentic amp controls. Another point of difference here is stuff like the mid shift mode on a Mark IV, or the bright mode, or the presence shift functions over there. They are often going to end up as different models on something like an AXFX3, whereas here you've got all of those things baked in. So there's just a single USA Mark IV lead model over there. If you want the mid gain model or you want the harmonics model, that is already in here on a switch. have a similar function with a bunch of other amps in here, say something like the Marshall JVM. Instead of having a separate Brit JVM OD1 green, Brit JVM OD1 orange, Brit JVM OD1 red, you've just got a single Brit JVM OD1. Really hope I never have to say that again in this video, with the different switches on here, green, orange, and red. Stuff indeed. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how this AM4 amp block works. We can, of course, add other effects to it. And I've explored the 4 different channels you get in the amp block. All the other blocks in here have 4 different channels as well. So yes, while there are 4 simultaneous blocks that you can run on here, really, you've got a slot here that can have 4 different types of an effect, like say 4 different drives, 4 different amps. You could put a delay here. In fact, let's do this while we do it. I'll drag them and drop them so that they're in there. I could have 4 different delays. I could have 4 different reverbs or phases or EQs on here as well. That's just in a single preset. I can then arrange those into 4 scenes and switch gaplessly between channels, scenes, and presets in here. So it is so much more powerful than I think a lot of people initially realize, where they go, what do you mean only 4 slots? If you're coming from a pedal board where you had 4 real pedals and they all just did one thing, they had one preset on them, it's way different, right? This is like having a pedal board with 4 different multi-effects on them, each one being dialed in for a specific type of tone. Say a drive pedal with 4 presets, an amp pedal with 4 presets, a delay pedal with 4 presets, and a reverb block with 4 presets. Furthermore, you can use the reverb for delay and reverb at the same time. You could set up the delay for a slapback on one channel, a chorus on another channel, and a long delay on another. In fact, we should do some of these things while we're here. So I've got the band commander at the moment. Let's say I wanted to set up a preset here where I've got, like, just say a room reverb happening on here. I'm going to come over to the different rooms. Let's just go for the large room. I really like the way that one sounds. I'll bypass the delay at the moment. So I've got the delay off, the drive off. It's just amp and reverb. So I can go in and tweak the reverb on there. Again, I've got expert edit so that I can do all the things I would normally do on the AXFX3, FM9, or FM3, including being able to EQ the reverb. Adding a bit of a low cut is always a great little tip on there that I like to do. Alrighty, so I've got a reverb and an amp. For the drive, I love this Crowther hotcake model in here. It is called the Griddle Cake over here. You can start with the presence all the way down. Let's just kick it in and see what it does in front of the clean amp. Pretty happy with that. I might like, say, a tube screamer as an option over here. We'll go Valve Screamer VS9, tone all the way down, drive cranked up, and a bit of level on there. Great with the neck pickup. Set up channel C, say for a fuzz. Let's add a fuzz face model on here. Again, crank the drive on here. I like bring the tone down a little bit on there, and a bit of level is always nice. As a fun aside, the input block here features the same variable input impedance that you get on the AXFX3 and FM9. For example, if I wanted to play around with this, I could say do something like 70K with a cap in front of the fuzz over here, which is going to change the characteristics when I roll down my volume control. Say if I'm on the middle pickup. Get into the nerdy stuff with that. Finally, let's add a couple of different echoes on here. I mean, I am a sucker for a great sounding stereo delay on here. I think the stereo BBD at the stock settings normally does the trick. We'll start with that one. I'll program a couple of other ones in here. We have the new surround delay type that's just been added to the AXFX3. For C, let's go for, say, a mono BBD, and I'll set it up for a little bit of slapback over here. And then D, I mean, let's add the mighty 2290 with modulation over here. Make sure you listen in stereo for all of these types. I'll just take you through each of them. And you know what? I kind of liked having that fuzz on there, so I might just roll with that tone to get started. So stereo BBD and then the rest. So that's just staying on that single clean amp block on there and then adding some different channels from various effects. What I love in here is in the setup menu over here, you can program the foot switches so that they have a hold function on there that you can customize. So you can see over here, I have set this up in a custom mode. For me, what I like having is when I press foot switch number 1, having it take me into the tuner mode. If I press and hold foot switch number 2, it's going to take me to scenes mode, so I can then select my scenes. If I press and hold the third foot switch, this is going to take me into effects mode where I can just use this like a pedal board, toggling effects on and off. And then for the last block in here, I've set this up as the channel picker. And the reason I've done that is my live preset, the very last block I have is a delay. And I like being able to cycle through a couple of different delay sounds whenever I'm just playing around on there. I normally stick to, say, 1 or 2 amp block tones in there, arrange them into scenes, but then having the ability to cycle through channels on my favorite effect. And again, these are totally customizable over here. It does come with a preset mode on there where you don't have to program anything, but I like being able to customize anything Fractal. That's kind of the point, and a great point of difference over here. So speaking of scenes, what scenes let me do are they let me save the bypass state and the channel of any block in here. So what I could do is I could, say, set up my clean amp over here. I could have a little bit of that slapback on here, and I could leave it on the large room reverb. I'm going to just add a couple of different reverbs over here. Let's do the gold plate on channel B, and let's do the Ursa major on channel C over here. That's one of these special effect types right there. So I'm just going to have 3 different reverb sounds that I can toggle between over there. So my first scene, I'm just going to call clean slap over here. So we'll program that one in and we'll hit save. So it sounds like this. Now for scene 2, let's say I want a couple of different combinations over here. I'm going to have this Tube Screamer model on. I'm going to go to channel B over here, which was my Brit 800 model, and I'm going to have the stereo BBD delay ready to go, but it's going to be bypass, and I will set up the gold plate reverb because I love the sound of that one. So I'll just call this 2203 for the classic Marshall style thing. Scene 3, I will have set up as my boogie lead scene over here with the 2290 delay and again the gold plate reverb. You can see over there, while the drive block is bypassed, it is set to the fuzz phase. So if I do want to add the fuzz to that scene, I can do that really easily. Then scene 4, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load from my blocks library. Actually, I've already done it. My favorite high gain amp settings in here. It's this FAS Stealth Blue amp model with my free cab IR over here. I'm not going to use a drive in front, but we'll maybe try a different delay over here. Let's go for the surround delay. I'm going to have it bypassed though, and again, I'll use that gold plate reverb. Remember my 4th foot switch where the reverb block is in sync with, I can cycle through the different reverbs if I like over there. So I'll just call this one Stealth over here. I'm going to grab my drop C guitar and let you hear that. Stuff. Now, of course, you could extend this to any of the other blocks on here. The blocks that you include in a preset are going to come down to personal preference, but of course, you've got gapless switching between presets. So if you wanted to have a preset with all the same settings, but say a drive block in front, and then the next preset have a phaser block as your first block over there, you can switch between them seamlessly using presets as well. So that is very, very cool. I am still just very used to the scenes way of thinking when it comes to Fractal presets on here, but you could, of course, use a per preset style setup on here where you just use a preset for one particular tone that you need in a song. And again, just switch between them gaplessly over here. All right. For me, I like using a single cabinet impulse for all of my live tones. And surprise, surprise, it's my free cab IR. Again, if you want it, it's linked in the video description, absolutely free, so you can use it for yourself. But I find this provides a level of consistency between different amp tones on here. So let's say I love the way this particular cab sounds in here and I want to add it to all my other channels. Well, what I can do is come up here with the channel function, and if I wanted to, I could take the amp and cab settings and copy them to any other channel on here. I could take just the amp settings and copy them, or I could take just the cab settings over here. So I'm going to copy just the cab. This is cab D. I'm going to copy it to all of them over here. So now, if we have a look in my amp block cab section, all of these have the same cab IR on here. And again, that's going to just provide this level of consistency when I change through them. Anytime I gigged with a multi-channel amp in the real world, I always just ran them through a single cabinet over there. So kind of makes sense. Let's have a listen to the tones on here. So we're going Band Commander, we're going the JCM800. Actually, you know what? I've got these scenes set up. So let's leave this on channel D and save it and go through now that I've got the same cab IR on here. FES Stealth Blue has a lovely chunky low end, but it's got some of that mid-range thrack that you get from a Marshall. So it's like thicker than the JCM800. It cuts a little bit more than the Mark series. It's why I've been using it so much. But again, There's hundreds of amp models. There are 45 different Dynacab selections in there with 4 mics each. You've got 4 channels per block in here. You can really, really do a lot. And I haven't even got into modifiers, which I will do in just a second. But here's my live preset anyway. I'll just show you some of the little tricks that I've used in here. So it's a wah. Again, it's this FAS Stealth Blue with my free cab IR. I've found live somewhere between 5 and 6K for a high cut. Works really well when you're playing very, very loud. Now, there is no pitch block in here. There's also no plex or multi-tap, and I love those blocks in there. But for some stereo spread, you could use the enhancer, or you could use something like the dimension chorus over here, which I've done. And then at the end of the chain, I've got the surround delay for my lead scene. It's currently bypass at the moment. So chunk lead, a rhythmic delay. In channel D, I'm using the tube pre for my clean sound, and the trick is in Expert Edit, I've got a tilt EQ for the input EQ, and I'm using a lot of the output compression on there, kind of going for the Rockman style thing. So I'll let you hear the 4 scenes across here. I'm also using the amp block output boost on channel B over here. So the settings are slightly different between channel A and channel B. Same amp model though, just more gain and mid-range for the leads, but it does have that automatic output boost kicking in, so it will be louder, and loud is more good. I've also got a wah assigned to pedal number 1 in here so that I can make wah noises. Another really cool feature in here is you've got the modifiers and controllers from the big Fractal unit. So if you wanted to set up, say, the pitch follower in here to control the amount of mid-range that you have and the overall input trim, along with things like the input gain on the reverb and the delay, you can do that. So if I play low, I'm going to get a pretty dry. So if I play low, I'm going to get a pretty dry, tight sound. As I play higher, it's going to get more and more saturated and more drenched in that wet, greasy goodness. And then you can do wacky stuff like attaching an LFO to, say, the motor speed of a tape delay, which I've done here. You can see this is a square wave LFO synced to the tempo. It is just going to shift from a value of 1 to 2 on the motor speed, so I get this kind of glitchy pitch shifting tone. Pull up stumps for today's video. I feel like that's a pretty good introduction to how deep you can get with the AM4. Again, these things are designed on here so that you don't need to deep dive. The amp block gives you the amp controls, the cab settings, and then some extras straight up. You've got all the different delay effect types. You've got all the different reverb effect types. Any of the blocks in here that you can see are going to have all the same effect types as the Axe-FX 3, FM9, and FM3. And again, you've got stuff like gapless switching between channels, scenes, and presets on there. So you can kind of customize this to use it whatever way you want. If you just want to chuck this in your gig bag as a backup, if you want to use it as your main rig, if you want to run, say, some analog drives in front of it and then use a bunch of extra outboard gear and stereo after it, you can do that. You can link it with the VP4 digitally. Of course, there's MIDI control, which we have not touched on over here. You can see in the setup menu, there's an entire section for MIDI. So you can come in here and program those. You can program all of these MIDI CCs as well. You've got your global settings that you can get into, and you can also use this as an audio interface. Man, what a time to be alive. Hopefully this answers some of the questions from the launch of the AM4. Let me know if you've got any other questions. And if you want to support what I'm doing, links to my Patreon, the music that I make with my band Ragdoll, and my AM4 blocks library are all linked in the video description, along with my free IR. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.